Jamal Abdullah El-Amin is a black revolutionary, a community activist, and a devoted Muslim. He is most well known for his activism in the 1960s with the SNCC and the Black Panther Party. The most famous quote is that violence is as American as apple pie. He was instrumental in the Black Liberation Movement, and he is currently a political prisoner. He is 77 years old, has been in prison for 20 years over charges of murder in the first degree of 2 Fulton Sheriff deputies. Why am I talking about H. Rap Brown or Jamal Abdullah El-Amin? Well, we are entering a very turbulent period of protest, of depression, and of death. And we must remember the activists and the fighters that came before us, those alive and those who are not with us anymore. We must realize that the situations are unique, but at the same time are very similar and very repeating. And in order for us to learn and adapt our tactics, in order to make sure as many of us come out safe, sound, and organized, we must learn from the past, from people that came before us and other movements that came before us. And we must also learn and remember and fight for the people who have fought before us. That is why I'm talking about H. Rap Brown or Jamal Abdullah El-Amin. Let's talk about his early activism. His first case of activism comes from his high school years. He went to high school at Southern High School, Baton Rouge. He led a school walkout, which shut down the entire school for 2 days. He was also very active in the SNCC. He was introduced to the SNCC by his brother, Edward Brown. He hosted him at Howard University and gave him a platform to be able to voice his mind. He would later become the leader of Howard University's SNCC chapter, which stands for Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. This position he was in, his introduction to the SNCC, paved the way for more developed politics and also more developed understanding of community activism and tactics. He played a part in many events throughout the Civil Rights Movement, from the 1964 Freedom Summer, where he went to Mississippi to fight for voting rights. But he grew disillusioned. He found frustration in all of the barriers set up by the white establishment to keep new Africans from voting. He also saw the weakness of the Democratic Party and of white liberals in their response and support for black struggle. This was primarily because of the MFPP and also the Johnson administration's weak support or no support for the struggle. So he began to realize what Malcolm X realized, that white liberals and conservatives are two sides of the same coin. One is the fox, one is the wolf. They both want the same thing, but they have different means of obtaining that same thing. Rap Brown would later become the chairman of the entire SNCC. He would be instrumental in, number one, renaming it to the Student National Coordinating Committee instead of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, but also will become instrumental in many events throughout the American Empire. One event that comes to mind is the Cambridge Race Riot of 1967. At Cambridge, Rap Brown gave a fiery speech. But Rap Brown is not the reason why the violence started to begin with. Rap Brown, after giving a fiery speech, was shot in the face with buckshot. The people, the protesters in the African community, were angered by this greatly. And so a race riot ensued. A school was burned down. There was attempts to put it out by the community, which were ultimately futile due to the massiveness of the flame. The fire department refused to put out the flame for obvious racial reasons. This event influenced the Rap Brown Law of 1968 by the FBI's 18-month hunt for R. Rap Brown after the riots. He was eventually arrested in 1970 and was charged with robbery. This law made it illegal to travel interstate commerce with the intent to participate in a riot. Purposely sounds very vague. This law has been used against many revolutionaries and many activists throughout the years forward. Rap Brown spent 5 years in Attica. During that time, he converted to Islam, changed his name from Hubert Geroid Brown to Jamal Abdullah El-Amin. He became affiliated with the Dur-ul-Islam movement and became the leader of the largest black Islamic movement in the United States, the National Ummah. He would work tirelessly within this group to renew dilapidated areas, organize the American Islamic community, and also found mosques. There are currently 36 mosques within the National Ummah organization. He also did a lot of work in Atlanta, Georgia, specifically in the West End community of Atlanta. He helped organize Stop the Killings movement during a time where there was mass violence in the streets. He would also organize truces between gangs to stop the killings. He would also organize local Muslim communities. He was deeply devoted to his Islamic faith after Attica. So now let's talk about the case. Jamal Abdullah El-Amin was accused of killing 2 Fulton deputies. Arrested in 2000, and during his arrest he was spat on and beaten by federal officers. He was arrested in Whitehall, Alabama. Then he was charged in 2002 on 13 counts, including felony murder. Jamal has pleaded his innocence ever since. In 2008, it was concluded that he had had his civil rights violated. His legal mail that was transferred in and out of the local prison Whitestone visit he was at was opened by staff and wardens of the prison. A judge agreed that this was an egregious civil rights violation, but nothing was done about it. Then we move on to his movement from Wrightsville prison to a federal penitentiary in Arizona. This was because of him being accused by the warden and by the staff of radicalizing inmates. And the state of Georgia was all too happy to give him away to the federal government, even though he was not charged by the feds, showing some sort of collaboration between the FBI and the state government. So Jamal Abdullah El-Amin is currently very ill. He is 76 years old and is in dire need of rest. He is a civil rights icon that should be remembered regardless of your questioning of his activities. Whether you agree that he killed those 2 deputies or not, doesn't matter. Whether you agree to the killings or not, doesn't matter. He is a civil rights icon and a revolutionary who has fought for the Black Liberation Movement for decades, longer than most have been alive. And he should be celebrated. And he should be remembered as the revolutionary he is. And he should be continuously fought for until we cannot fight anymore. Either we've achieved victory in this case, or we don't. So I made this video because we are entering dire times. And there will be more Rap Browns. People in Rap Brown situations, of course. They will become political prisoners. Those political prisoners will be treated egregiously. The quote-unquote civil rights of the state that they claim we have will be completely ignored. There'll be no attempt to look at those. And so if we are going to move into this decade, the 20s, we need to keep in mind the struggles of the past century and the ramifications of those struggles, and also the people who are suffering because they dedicated themselves to the cause. Some of them have been forgotten. Some of them have been remembered. But all of them deserve to be remembered, and none of them deserve to be forgotten. I am Afro-Syndicalist.